Okay, welcome back, AP Biology. We just had close to a week off from school for our Thanksgiving break. So we want to remember a little bit about where we were. We were talking about cellular respiration. We've already reviewed glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport, and then talked about other metabolites that can enter the transport or that can enter cellular respiration. We have different sugars that can enter into glycolysis. We have fatty acids, amino acids that can enter into the Krebs cycle. And then if we have enough product, we can use that. If we have enough energy, we can use the raw materials to build other things. So that was the last lesson we were talking about. So today we go on and we talk about what if oxygen is not available. So we're going to look at two different anaerobic pathways, the lactic acid pathway and the alcohol pathway. Notice they are both named according to what they make. Alcohol fermentation makes alcohol. Lactic acid fermentation makes lactate or lactic acid. Typically, bacteria and mammals will undergo lactic acid, and yeast will undergo alcohol fermentation. Other bacteria, plants can undergo the ethanol as well. So it depends on the organism and it depends on the enzymes that are available. So you should be able to summarize the two pathways, the lactic acid and the alcohol fermentation. You should identify conditions under which an organism would switch between anaerobic and aerobic pathways. So whether or not oxygen is available, whether or not the enzymes are available. Identify benefits and drawbacks of anaerobic respiration. So it's not very efficient, but we do benefit economically through many of the products we can make with anaerobic respiration. So again, looking back at aerobic respiration, where have we been? Glucose is broken down through glycolysis to produce pyruvate. Along the way, we used a little bit of energy, 2 ATP, in order to create 4 ATP, so we had a net gain of 2. So without a little energy input, we would not be able to get energy output. We then went through a transition phase where we stripped a carbon off of that pyruvate and made acetyl, which is a 2-carbon compound. Every time we take a carbon off, we get CO2 and NADH. So from our transition phase, we got 2 CO2s and 2 NADHs. The acetyl CoA combined with coenzyme A went into the Krebs cycle. We got 4. So the acetyl is going in and it's combining with oxaloacetate, a 4-carbon compound, to make citrate. And then that is one by one going to strip off the remaining carbons from pyruvate. And we get 4 more CO2s, 2 more ATPs, 6 NADHs, and FADH2. All of these are taking their electrons and hydrogens into the electron transport chain, where they go through a series of downstepping to the electronegative oxygen. So they're going to lose a little bit of their energy as they move through the electron transport chain. The energy is used to pump hydrogen into the intermembrane space where it diffuses out, making many more ATP molecules. And ultimately, oxygen is your final electron acceptor. So that's all well and good if oxygen is available. But if you don't have oxygen, those electrons are going to get backed up in the electron transport chain. So you need another way of making a little bit of energy in order for the cells to function. So that's when we're going to switch into one of the two anaerobic pathways, either lactate or ethanol. Neither of these make any more energy. Their whole purpose is to recycle NAD+. Without NAD+, glycolysis cannot continue. So the two pathways, you have alcohol fermentation, which is going to convert our 2 3-carbon pyruvates into 2 2-carbon ethanols. So remember, every time we lose a carbon, it becomes CO2. So we're familiar with the CO2 that is produced in some of our alcoholic beverages. Lactic acid fermentation produces lactic acid. You've probably felt this burning sensation in your muscles. Okay, notice no more ATP was made along the way. So the downside of this is that it's not very efficient, right? Not all of the carbon has been used from pyruvate. It's only partially reduced. So there's more energy available in those bonds that are holding the carbons together. So glycolysis is the only energy that you make. So you only get 2 ATP molecules out of this versus 36, right? So aerobic respiration is 18 times more efficient than glycolysis is because you can get way more energy. So this little bit of energy is the only energy that you're going to get. So I like this cartoon. The anaerobic ones are just sitting there because they have no energy, but the aerobic bacteria are doing jumping jacks, sit-ups, leg lifts because they have lots of energy. So once again, the whole point is to simply recycle NAD+. So glucose to pyruvate uses ATP, but it makes ATP, and it takes your NAD plus and it makes NADH. So I'm going to need to keep using ATP to keep this process going, so it kind of fuels itself. But if I run out of NAD plus, glycolysis will cease to continue. So the whole purpose of fermentation is to recycle that NAD plus for glycolysis. Lactic acid fermentation happens in animals, muscle cells of mammals. For example, you probably have felt that burning sensation. It's literally an acid. So pyruvate is converted into lactic acid, mostly in animals, but also in some bacteria. So bacteria can make lactic acid and other organic acids, or they can make the alcohol. It all depends on the enzymes that are present within their cells. Both these fermentation processes happen in the cytoplasm. So we know bacteria don't have organelles like the mitochondria, so it would make sense. They would need this to be organelle free. So lactic acid or alcohol fermentation, both happening in the cytoplasm, the same as glycolysis did, right? So this gives us very little energy. It can be used up very quickly, so short bursts in the animal world, perhaps fleeing a predator or going after prey. So this is showing us the lactic acid fermentation, glucose to pyruvate to lactate. This little bit of energy and is all we're getting. No more energy for fermentation. NAD plus is recycled. So it's a downfall for the organism because they only get a little bit of energy, enough to keep the cell working. But it's a benefit to us because we get several products via the lactic acid fermentation process. For example, yogurt. Lactobacillus is a bacteria that goes through lactic acid fermentation, and from that, the acid reaction with the milk allows us to create yogurt. Many of the souring processes like sauerkraut, pickling, those sorts of things all come from the process of fermentation, lactic acid fermentation. Alcohol fermentation obviously is going to make some alcohol. So wines and beers, for example. You're taking glucose, convert to pyruvate, and then pyruvate, remember, is the 3-carbon compound going to be converted into a 2-carbon compound of ethanol. So each pyruvate is going to lose a CO2 molecule, and that's the bubbles. That's the bubbles that expand as things are heated and make bread rise. It's the bubbles that you see in your alcohol. So the first fermentation pathway, no extra CO2. Second pathway, there is CO2. So you should be familiar with the differences between the two, right? A or without, not or without air is referring to oxygen. So anaerobic, no oxygen. Very quick ATP production. You don't have as many steps to go through. However, it can only be withstand for a short period of time, and you're not very efficient because you're leaving energy still in the pyruvate molecule. Along the way, you only get 2 ATP molecules, and we can use them for various products. In humans, we create lactic acid. Yeast create ethanol and CO2. And then bacteria, depending on the organisms, they have different enzymes present, so they'll make different byproducts. Aerobic respiration needs oxygen. Takes a lot longer to get the ATP out of there because there's many more steps, although we can continually make it. We don't run out. So it has a much more efficient energy transfer using all of the bonds that are within the glucose molecule. Along the way, we're going to release CO2 and water, and we breathe that out through external respiration. So that is my fermentation. I think this is our easiest topic of all of our AP Biology year. So I hope that is helpful. Have a good day.